Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining me today. My name is Heidi McIndoe. I'm a registered dietitian, and today I am all about creating a culinary garden. Excuse me, I am outside and it is hot. All right, so basically I'm just gonna go over a few of the basic, simple tips of how you can create your own culinary garden, no matter if you have a windowsill, a back porch, or a garden. And then we're going to go through a few slides at first, and then I'm actually going to do a little bit of replanting to show you how easy it really is. So I do have the chat open, so please feel free at any time to pop a comment or question in. You don't need to wait till the end. We can certainly have questions at the end as well, but I have no problem with comments and questions when you think of them. So let's get started here. Oh, and of course the next door neighbors are starting to mow the lawn now. So I'm hoping you guys can't hear that. And I hope you can hear me all right. All right, so first a few things. So why should we garden? I can just go to the grocery store and buy everything. Well, first of all, having a garden is just more than getting the food to eat. It's something to do outside. The food is awesome because that flavor, the food hasn't been sitting in some refrigerated case for a few weeks and shipping from halfway across the country. It literally got picked and eaten. So the freshness and the nutrient quality and the flavor is really just maximized when you are growing it yourself. Like I said, it's great. It's an activity. It's something to do in the summer that's just relaxing and easy and fun, and not something you have to stress about or be anxious about. And like I said, it's a reason to get outside. Gardening is easy. Again, I mean, it can be complicated. It can be really complex, but it doesn't need to be. It can be, just as easy as buying a small plant at a nursery and, replanting it and sort of taking care of it to let it thrive. And gardening, again, can be very expensive, but also can be very affordable. So gardening is one of those things that you go in at your level, your commitment level, your size level, your price level. It can vary for every day. The basics are the same, and you just choose how much you can participate, how much will fit in your life without making it a stressful chore, because that's not really the point of it. And like I said, I mean, so the plant that I am repotting today, I think it was $1.99. My local nursery closed recently. They close at the beginning of July every year. So I just picked up some chives at the grocery store. They were like $1.99, and I could buy a jar of chives for maybe $4.99. But this plant of chives for $1.99 is probably going to last me a lot longer, as long as I take care of it, and it's going to, like I said, taste so much fresher. So if you are new to planting, there are certain plants that grow easier than others. So you may want to look into getting those if this is, your first foray into any kind of planting or gardening kind of things. And again, remember, we're just talking about culinary here. There's plenty of flowers and things like that you can grow, but we're looking at the culinary. So I'm thinking herbs, I'm thinking fruits, I'm thinking veggies. So in terms of herbs, most herbs are pretty easy to grow. Basil grows like crazy. Oregano grows pretty well. Parsley, chives, mint and oregano actually grow so much that they could overrun your garden. So when it comes to those, what I actually like to do is either just put them in a pot versus in my garden, or I actually put them in a pot and then bury the pot in my garden. And what that does is it gives me that herb, that plant in the garden where I want it. However, because that pot is there, those roots don't sort of spread under the ground and have me with oregano and mint all over the backyard. In terms of veggies, tomatoes, especially cherry tomatoes, super easy. Peppers, especially hot peppers, really, really easy to grow. Green onions, lettuce is great. One of the fun things about lettuce is you don't have to sort of wait for a certain time where you harvest a whole bunch of lettuce. Once it has grown enough where you can eat a leaf, it's the size you want it, you can just start picking leaves and eating them, and it will continue to grow. Things like romaine and like bib lettuce, things like that. So like I said, these are some of the easier things to grow. And also some of these grow better when you're mixing them together. So basil and tomatoes grow really well together. They sort of have this synergistic relationship. And so it's really nice to plant them together. I will also say, although maybe I haven't tried this one specifically, if you've got pests in your yard, and I mean, some people call them pests. I call them cute little bunnies and chipmunks, but they do eat produce. So I've tried various different things to stop them from eating produce. However, I have heard that planting marigolds may keep some pests away. They don't like the smell, so you could always, if you are gardening outside, you can always try putting some marigolds around. And again, super easy plant to grow. All right, so what is our supply list? What do we need? We need, it would be helpful at least to have a little, small trowel, you'll see today I have a little handheld shovel, a water source, whether that is a hose or just a watering can or a, big glass, or I've used measuring cups from my kitchen before. That's what I'm using today. Some potting soil, and you do want potting soil. You don't just want to get dirt from the backyard. Because first of all, potting soil has something usually in it called vermiculite, which helps lighten up the soil. And when you've got these very young plants, the roots are very not super strong. They're very fragile. That's what I'm looking for. And just burying them in just hard packed dirt from the backyard may not let them they may not have the strength to sort of grow. And if the roots aren't growing, the plant's not growing. So you need something light enough that those roots can sort of, work their way through. In addition, potting soil, you buy it in a bag at the nursery or the hardware store or the home goods store and home improvement store. It's clean. You don't know what various bacteria or fungus might be in the dirt in your backyard, and you're growing this plant to eat. You don't necessarily want to be adding something that could harm you or just the plant. It may not be a suitable growing environment for the plant. So the potting soil, it's clean and it's full of nutrients. The dirt in your backyard, maybe not so much. And containers. Whether you are potting in pots or in your yard, you need space. We get these plants as they're very small, and we need to remember that they grow. And so we can't just, have maybe a 1 foot by 1 foot space and put all of our tomatoes and our peppers and our basil and our oregano and everything in there, because they're going to grow both above the ground and underground, and you don't want them to be crowded out because they just won't grow healthfully if they are too crowded together. If you were doing pots, again, same thing. You don't need gigantic pots for many plants. Depends on the plant you get, but you do want plants large enough. You'll see the pot I'm using today. You want something bigger than what you bring the plant home in, just so those roots have room to grow. You also want drain holes. So some pots come with the sort of a bottom piece that's attached to it that lets some loose water or excess water drain into. If you look it over and flip it over and it just has the holes in the bottom, you just want to get a little liner to put under that, or a dish plate. I was reading some on Facebook the other day and I loved this idea. Go to like the a garage sale or something like that, antique store, and get old saucers, tea saucers, and they look nice, but they're great water catchers to put under pots. And you need some sun. You need light. If you remember high school, I think it was biology class. The plants need that photosynthesis to produce the nutrients that they need to grow, and they need sun for that. So we need to get some source of light. Some plants need more light than others, but most plants are going to need, when we're talking culinary plants, food plants, they will need several hours of sun a day. All right, so when it comes to the planting part, we got 2 steps. We want to make sure there's drainage, and we need to dig. So if we're putting in a pot, not really have to dig, and if you're putting in the backyard, you don't have to worry about the draining. So this depends on where you're planting it. So if we are putting in a pot, like I said, we want drain holes. If your pot doesn't have drain holes, which I have plenty of pots that don't, you want to put something in the bottom so that if you do overwater, which is very common, that water, so you don't want to keep that soil, that dirt, too sopping wet. Many plants don't do well when their roots are just soaking wet, and it can hinder their growth and promote fungus or bacteria or things from growing. So we want to make something at the bottom of that pot to allow the excess water to sort of hang out in, so it's not, our roots aren't sitting in there. So I have done, in this picture, obviously you see you put some little pebbles and stones in there, and then they put a little coffee filter on top. That's a great way to do it. I have taken shards of like a broken pot and put them in the bottom of a pot. I've actually taken my kids' little applesauce cups, like the fruit cups, turned those upside down, poked a couple holes in the top, and put those in the bottom of a pot. So just anything that is going to sort of let water hang out in it and let it drain out of the soil. If we are talking in the backyard digging, you basically want to dig a hole that is slightly bigger in both diameter and height of the pot that you have the plant in currently. That way you have room to add, first it'll fit. You don't want it sitting above the ground level because the roots may get sun damaged, heat damaged if they're too far above ground level. But by having a hole just a little bit bigger than your plant, then you will have space for that potting soil that we bought, that nice, loose, nutrient-dense soil that those roots, we want to let them grow into. All right, and when we're planting, so when we're planting, and I may find this when I dump my plant out, sometimes when you buy these plants in these small pots, that top picture there, that plant is totally root bound. The roots had nowhere to go, so they just started wrapping around the pot. Again, that's going to get to a point where, they just can't grow any further. So what I like to do when I repot a plant is I cut those roots. They're just going to keep growing, so you're not damaging them. And I'm not saying I'm cutting them all, but I may take a shear or even my my little trowel and just cut into a few spots. That lets that root that's coming from the plant, start to regrow at this new spot. What I also like to do is when I put the potting soil in the pot, I sometimes forget this, but I like to add a little bit of water in there so those roots have water right at the base. Again, not a ton, just dampen it a little bit. Then you put the plant in. Again, we should be, same thing when we're putting in a pot, we're putting this in a bigger pot. So I do tend to put some soil at the bottom of my pot so that the new plant is basically just shy of the top of the new pot. And that's, again, so that we make sure all the soil is covered, but also we need to have a little lower area, lower than the rim of the pot. Otherwise, when we water it, the water is just going to pour off the side of the pot and onto your ground, your living room, wherever you have this, your windowsill. So then we put the plant in. Like I said, I'm going to show you all this. And then we just sort of, pack all that dirt in. We don't need it hard packed, but we don't want it so loose that once we water it, The weight of it, brings all the soil down to the bottom, and now there's nothing around that plant, the root system. So we do want to make sure once we put it in that we sort of, give it a nice little pack to get everything set in there. All right, and so just some tips for success. You want to make sure that there is enough light. Remember, these plants need light, so 6 to 8 hours a day of bright sunlight is needed. I know they have, I've never tried any of the, grow lights. I know those exist too. But hopefully the point of this is you're getting, you're doing this because you want to beautify or enjoy some of your outside space. So again, it may be a windowsill for some, which isn't an outside space, but if you have like a front step or a patio or a little area in your backyard, we want to make sure that where you put these plants is getting sun. I already talked about not overcrowding. So find out all seed packets, and you can easily Google how big certain plants will get, and that will allow you to know how far apart to put them or how big a pot you might need. And then certainly water. Water, if they're outside and it's raining consistently, you're fine. I tend to, any day it doesn't rain in my yard, I tend to be watering. You really want to be watering consistently, moderate amounts versus having the plant dry out and then flooding it and having it dry out and flooding it. You sort of want it just consistently slightly damp. I tend to water my hanging plants until water comes out the drain hole. That way I know the water has gotten all the way to the bottom of the pot. And then I stop so that I don't need to continue to water and flood the pot more than that. It's reached the bottom and it's good. And again, if your plant is in the ground, you just have to judge your temperature. If you live in a very dry, hot climate, you're going to need to be watering more regularly than if you live in a cooler, wetter climate. All right, so that is the basics. So now what I'm going to do is I told you I have these chives, so I'm going to stop sharing my screen. Oh, and apparently turn on my camera. There we go. Okay, so what I have is, like I said, this is just a little pot of chives I got at the grocery store in the produce department. I was really hoping for parsley, but I love chives, so I'm fine. I've got my pot, which is, a little bit bigger. I've got my gloves, which you don't need, and I've got my little trowel. And down here, I have a huge bag of potting soil, so it is on the ground. So what we're going to do first is we need to figure out how much soil we need to put in this pot. So I want this plant to be about to here in there. So I see that I need maybe an inch or so of soil in the bottom of the pot. So I'm going to take this down here. Oops. And this is what I meant. Can you see all those white things? Excuse my cat. That's the vermiculite that helps to lighten up the soil. And you can also see, look at how no, Hero. Excuse me. So this soil is nice and dark and rich with nutrients, and it's very, very light. Okay. So apparently Hero is extremely interested in our chives today. All right, so now next, and then I did say I want to add just a smidge of water. All right, so now to get the pot out, or the plant out, I usually just give it a little squeeze, loosen up all those edges. Let's do this on the bag. There we go. And I just squeeze the bottom and give it a gentle, come on, tug. There we go. All right, so this isn't too root bound. The roots are going straight down. They haven't started wrapping around yet. If they had, I would just be taking this and sort of cutting into them, but I really don't need to for this. It's not bad. So now I'm going to pop it in here and center it. Perfect. That's exactly the height I wanted it to be. And now it might be easier just to use my hands, which is why I tend to wear the gloves, because I end up using my hands. So all I'm going to do is sort of hold the plant to the side. Do that on both sides. Pull it sort of this way. Do the same thing. There we go. And now on these opposite sides. All right, that's actually filling up quite nicely. I'm going to add a wee bit more, I think. Again, I don't want the water running off the side of the pot, but I also don't need a moat around my plant to gather water in. Okay. So now I just sort of gently pack that in, and boom, we have got our planted chives. So I'm going to just, anytime you replant something, you want to give it a nice drink of water. It's a little shock for it to be taken out of, its nice, lovely home. So we want to make sure it has, we've given it some vitamins. We want to make sure it has some water as well. And then I am just going to place this right over in my corner, and I am going to be good to go. Actually, I'll do that right now. Get it out of my face. All right. So do you guys have any questions? I'm happy to answer any questions about what I just did or anything I talked about. Give a little wipe up my dirt here. Not seeing any questions yet, but oh, you are very welcome. Thank you for tuning in today. What do you do for mint leaves that are yellowing? So are they outside or inside? It could be overwatering. So I would check that you're not overwatering. If they're yellowing and sort of dry feeling, it could be underwatering. So I would primarily look at the watering. Oh yeah. It's things are crazy with all this rain. So yeah, that's probably what it is if they're outside. And I'm trying to see how mine are looking right now. Yeah, it's hard to control nature. So hopefully we'll have a little balance of some warmer days and let things dry out a bit. That's the one thing about planting out in the garden. It's nice because, I don't have to water as much maybe because it rains, but then it rains and it rains and it rains, and that might be too much. All right. Well, it doesn't look like anyone else has any more questions. So I will say have a great rest of your day. And thank you so much for tuning in.